Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Steve, and I'm your host, right? I got two special guests on the show today. Retired First Sergeant Danny Wallace, a good friend, a warrior, a blind veteran like myself. We've done a lot of things on the Appalachian Trail. We work with the U.S. Army Rangers at Camp Frank D. Merrill, where we work with a lot of guys that served in the military and served with the Rangers. And we're going to have a discussion about this big mission that we have. Also on the call is Scott Mansker. He's the co-founder and race director for MR340, otherwise known as the Missouri River 340. So stay tuned and listen in. We're back. So Dan, how are you doing, man?
Outstanding.
And Scott, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting us on.
No, thank you guys for coming on. And I don't know Scott real well. I'm going to get to know him here on the call. But Dan and I have done a lot of things. Dan, maybe introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are.
My name is Danny Wallace. I'm retired First Sergeant from the U.S. Army. I spent 20 years in the U.S. Army, joined in 85. In 2003, I was blinded by a suicide car bomber in northern Iraq, a little town called Tel Afar. At that time, I had 18 years in service with surgeries and recovery and the good fellowship of my commanders. I stayed in and got my regular 20 years regular retirement. I didn't have to medically retire, and I'm very thankful for that. And so in 2005, I retired. I went and got some degrees, did some civilian education, and I think it was 2013 I finally recognized that I was a blinded veteran. So I went to blind rehab at Hines, and that's when I first came in contact with the Blinded Veterans Association. I joined the Blinded Veterans Association, and it's been very helpful for me since then, and I became much more involved. Currently, I am the national treasurer for the Blinded Veterans Association. I've served as National Sergeant at Arms, served on various committees. The one that's near and dear to Steve and I's heart is the Operation Peer Support Committee. And that's to get our veterans out moving, get them up off the couch, get them moving. But I think it's also to bring awareness to our association. And I think the many things that we have done together, Steve, it's always great to have those personal accomplishments, but I think it's also more to promote the Blinded Veterans Association. People, I believe, sometimes have a stereotype in their mind of a blind person, and they're not going to know if you're a veteran until you start having the conversation. But they have this stereotype in their mind of a blind person, and when we're going out and doing these things, whether it's riding the tandem bikes across the Rockies, which we've done together, the Ranger camp, climbing, rappelling, whatever, kayaking, whatever it is that we do, the typical person in society doesn't associate that with a blinded person.
Yeah.
So it's always out there promoting and giving awareness to our association. And I believe the mission of our association, obviously. I believe in the mission of our association. And once again, I'll do everything in my power as long as I can to go out there and promote and gain more awareness for our association. Is that pretty much what you're looking for, Steve?
Yeah, it's just a conversation. Everybody can relax. The going back though, Dan, Edward Hines Jr. VA Hospital, which is where one of the first blind centers for the veterans community existed there near Chicago, is where you went through, and that's kind of where you fell into this community and became part of this community. And then the Blinded Veterans Association is a congressionally chartered organization, correct?
Yes, and I I could get more in depth of that, which it was founded by a group of about 100 war-blinded World War II soldiers on March 28th, 1945. The Blinded Veterans Association is the only national veteran service organization exclusively dedicated to serving the needs of blinded veterans.
Yeah.
We were congressionally chartered by Congress in 1958, and we are the only advocates and representatives for blinded veterans in both the executive and legislative branches of the government.
If I could pause you, Dan. No, thanks for that. And we'll get into more of that. I want to bring Scott into the conversation. So Scott, I have a question about the Missouri River Challenge and the 340. Have you had many conversations with anybody that's blind that wants to do the paddle?
No, but we've had people with challenges, attempt the race and be successful at it. And we've had wounded veterans, amputees do the race.
Absolutely.
People with cerebral palsy, so it's an accessible race in that it's more about, just the grueling mental aspect of grinding out 340 miles. So it's accessible to all sorts of people.
That makes me wonder about who you are. Like what you're a co-founder or founder of the race, and I know you're the race director. I believe from the notes you provided. Are you big into these extreme sports? You've been a big paddler your whole life.
My first experience with the Missouri River was as a 20-year-old kid. This was in 1989, and me and some friends, we built a raft and grabbed some paddles and jumped on and just lived on it for a week going down the river. So that was my first experience paddling on the river for an extended period of time, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. I had grown up in Kansas City and had driven over the river in a car 1,000 times, but had never been face to face with it. And it's intimidating when you first, stare it down. But once we were on it, it was just an immediate connection for me. I couldn't believe how I was immediately transported from an urban environment to what just seemed like, the wilds of
vast wilderness,
Alaska. Yeah. And I knew, intellectually that there were railroad tracks just over those trees and a highway just over those trees. But all I could see was, just vegetation and sandbars and fish and birds. And so that's how I got started with that. And over time, as the internet came along and I started to learn about canoe races in other parts of the country, I thought, why is nobody doing a canoe race on this river? It's actually perfect for it. And after 10 years of waiting for someone else to invent a race on my river, we finally just said, let's just throw up a website and, hopefully 3 or 4 people will see it and join the race, and we'll be part of it, and it'll be kind of a proof of concept and see if it can work. And that was kind of how the first year of the race went. It just
when was that? What year was that?
That was 2006.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had 11 boats enter, which was way more than I had anticipated. And that was 15 people, but they were from, Texas and North Carolina. And it had somehow filtered out there that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And, we took off, and I knew we were in trouble the next day when my phone started blowing up. We paddle all night. My phone starts blowing up in the morning, and apparently, a photographer for the Kansas City Star, their photo had gotten picked up by USA Today, and the race was on the first page of USA Today, the day after we started. And that whole day out on the river, I was doing, radio interviews, from my flip phone. And immediately I'm getting calls from across the country, people saying, when can we sign up for next year? So, we only had a little space to breathe that first day.
Well, going back to what how you were explaining, how you sensed what your surroundings were when you were on the water. it's such a big thing for someone like myself who loves to be outside, who joined the military to work, out to rough it, to do interesting things. And Dan can relate. And getting on a boat, especially just this past September, I was part of a small team that kayaked the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. We pulled out at Diamond Creek, but we did 226 miles of the Colorado River. And I was in my own hard shell. I was in a Jackson's, but the thing about being on these rivers, and I've been on a lot of other rivers, the Salmon, the Youghiogheny, the Cheat, the Platte, the Poudre. I mean, New River, doing different sections of whitewater. Again, in my own boat with a team, kind of like the Blue Angels, working really hard with communication and the skill set that you develop as a paddler, especially kayaker. It's really remarkable the sensation of freedom and empowerment that you get from being from challenging yourself and pushing yourself. And I think it's for everybody. So it's really cool to have this opportunity and for people to believe in someone that might be challenged, disabled, whatever term you want to use. And I think Dan, how did you? Was this culminated from talking to people there in the Kansas City area, or how did that come about?
Actually, it came about from our fellow member, Tim Hornick.
Mr. Tim.
Yeah, Tim had mentioned saying, "Hey, there's this MR340," and he was explaining it to me. He says, "What do you think? Something down our alley?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's right down our alley because it's out of the ordinary. It's extreme. It's going to test us and once again put us out there." I'm like, "I'm down 100%. Let's do it."
It is, and we've got how many people boats we're trying to put on the water, Dan?
So currently we have 5. It'll be 5 blinded veterans, so 1 per canoe. And then we have the support of the Veterans Administration employees. So we'll have 3 VA employees. We'll have my grandson who will be guiding me. And then Tim has a guide for himself, and it's someone who's actually done the event and successfully completed it last year, I believe. So, there's going to be a total of 10 of us, and then we have our, that's a whole nother conversation, our support group that's going to be there supporting us.
It'll just be like Ranger camp with support that we have.
Except on the water.
Except on the water. Scott, I actually haven't read a tremendous amount about the the rules and everything related to the event. There's checkpoints, of course, and it's what I've read. I think on the internet is it's one of the longest continuous kayak canoe races, marathons in North America. I'm not sure if that's accurate or correct, but
Sure.
There's checkpoints, right? And you have to hit each one of these checkpoints.
Yeah, there's definitely a time component. We allow 88 hours for the race to complete, and to keep the what we call the safety halo manageable. We do have cutoff times at the back end, and so with those 8 checkpoints, you do have to meet those. And we have a motorboat that's called the Reaper that goes at the exact pace to meet those times. So if the Reaper gets to a checkpoint before you do, you're out.
Huh.
So,
gotcha.
A lot of people, that rarely happens. I mean, the Reaper might catch 3 or 4 boats a year. What actually happens is that someone gets to a checkpoint, they're exhausted, they're wiped out, they don't want to get back in their boat, and then the Reaper shows up.
Yeah.
Stops for a minute and starts going, and they realize, I have to catch this boat.
Yeah.
And beat it to the next checkpoint, and then they just pull out at that point. I mean, it's very mentally draining to feel like you're behind the pack.
Yeah.
Now there's there'll be 500 boats out there, and there's that energy of that.
Wow.
You're in the pack, you're in the group, and that momentum can just carry people along. But once you fall out of that pack, it's tough.
It's a true race then. I mean, you know, you're racing this motorized craft on the water. So
yeah,
how what's been the largest I guess participant pool or group boats have been on the water over the years?
Last year was 437 that started.
Wow. Okay.
Now 550 signed up, but I mean, you have that 15% that just don't show up to race. That's with any race. But so yeah, 437. We're shooting for 500 this year.
And what kind of crafts or boats? Anything that you can paddle, or there's specific boats that are allowed for the trip?
So we have divisions that are, you know, kind of divided up by how many butts are in seats. And, you know, so there's solo and tandem, and then we have the team division, which is 3 to 4, and we work our way on up to dragon boat, which we've had a 20-person dragon boat do the race. We also delineate by type of craft in that if you're on a stand-up paddleboard, which, believe it or not, we've had people finish, several people finish the race standing up. That's its own division, and then pedal drive is a separate division.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, we were on the Grand Canyon. They were stand-up paddlers doing the Colorado, the whitewater through the Grand Canyon. Yeah. That's amazing. That many boats. So you won't feel too alone unless I guess you're a straggler or you're way out in front. What boat ends up? What kind of craft is or boat is the one that usually comes in first? Repeatedly, or is that not the case? Is it different every year?
You know what? It's a lot of people think it would be a kayak, but we've never had a kayak be the first boat in. It's always canoes.
Wow.
A canoe, it's a racing canoe typically that can be either double bladed or single bladed, and the more experienced racers know that you need to switch it up. You know, it's different muscle groups.
Yeah.
And so double blading will really tear you up after a while, and so they'll switch to single blades and kind of give themselves a break, and then back to the doubles if need be. But the overall course record was set or broken again last year by a 5-man team in a racing canoe.
Wow.
And they did it in 33 hours and 1 minute, so over 10 miles an hour nonstop.
Yeah, they were rocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think a sea kayak would fare well, but I guess when I think about the muscle group and stuff and how you could exhaust yourself. I guess you have to be a beast of a human being.
Well, in these racing canoes, I mean, think of a big sea kayak that's had the top cut off.
Yep.
You know, they're very low to the water line. There's not a lot of freeboard. Very sleek, very tippy boats that end up winning.
So I was just, so my buddy Dan knows, but I was just in Madison, Wisconsin for Canoecopia. I was presenting there 2 times, Friday and Saturday, about the Colorado River expedition, the Vision team that I was on last year in September. And we were talking to some of the vendors because we're looking for some support with the boats. We've decided to do tandem teams with the 5 boats and canoes over individual craft, and so truly a team effort, you know, between the two, the blind veteran and our sighted counterpart that's acting as our guide. And yeah, we're looking for that kind of support, and I'm hoping that I can share this video with some individuals, some vendors and manufacturers, and gain some support for some cool boats.
Right on.
Dan, what do you think about these kinds of challenges? I know you mentioned a little bit in the beginning about some of the things that we've done together. What do you think this does for the community and for us as blind veterans?
I think as an individual, it's always, I think to move forward in life, you have to set challenges and goals that you want to accomplish. And these can come in many different forms and fashions. You know, Steve, we're big on the physical challenges, and that's the personal side of it. But as I stated earlier, I think part of it, you get that self-satisfaction when you complete it, but it's also the satisfaction you get because people are amazed that it's blinded veterans out doing these things. And it just, and you know as well as I do, Steve, we're always out there promoting the BVA and getting that more awareness. And like I said, I mean, how many times have we done something, Steve, and people are like, oh, y'all are blinded? And they're like, yeah, we're blinded veterans. And it's just getting more awareness out there. But, and also, like I said, it goes back to you want to have that self-satisfaction of, you know, I'm getting older, or, you know, I might not be able to see what I'm doing that well, but I still have to have goals in life. I'm not going to be stagnant and sit still.
Oh, absolutely. I think the reason why we like to pursue the physical things is because we've lost a physical thing. And I think a lot of that feeling of empowerment or recovery or rehab or accomplishment, especially when we even just attempting something like this, is something that sometimes can be very fearful, you know, or cause fear and panic in people's hearts and minds. And something about veterans too, you know, is you charge into you charge into that lead, you know, that rain of that hail of lead. But and you like a challenge, so I think it's a great thing that you guys came up with this plan, and I was just like, yeah, I'm all in, sure. Why not?
Well, and I think too, Steve, it's the camaraderie. And you know, you were standing next to me the one time someone had said, made a comment about, oh, you all are professional level athletes. And, you know, my reply to that is people like you, Steve, and Lonnie, and I mean, there's a whole list of them out there that I agree are professional level athletes. But when it comes to me, no, I'm just too stupid to quit. And I'm just doing my best to keep up with you all.
Oh, you're kicking ass. Scott, like, when you're paddling, have you done the challenge again, or do you kind of participate at all over the years again, or not so much?
No, it's too big of an animal. I mean, I'm in a motorboat and I'm out there the whole time, and I'm at every checkpoint when it closes, so I'm kind of towards the back and have to give people the news that they're out of the race. But yeah, it's a full-time. You know, we're awake. The staff of the race, we sleep typically 5 hours out of the 88 hours during that week, just getting everybody down the river.
Most definitely. Can the participants or the racers portage? I mean, not portage, but stop at different places to receive support anywhere along the river, or is it?
Such a big part of the culture of the race is the ground crew that follows along, that gives support to the racer, and the communities that we've put these checkpoints in have really embraced the race and have turned it into, you know, a party in their town. You know, the first couple checkpoints, they're only open 5 or 6 hours as we pass through, but some of those checkpoints downstream are 48-hour, you know, from when the first racer gets there to when the last racer gets there. And they've turned it into fundraisers because they're selling, you know, it's usually Boy Scouts or a nonprofit group like that that's selling hot dogs, burgers, coffee, pancakes around the clock all night. And it becomes for them, you know, the Boy Scouts, you've probably experienced Boy Scout fundraising where, you know, you got to sell popcorn this time of year, and then you sell something else, and then you're just to go to camp. But these guys, you know, they do a 36 or 48-hour concession stand, and it's more money than they can spend in a year on, you know, going on high adventure trips and boundary waters and all this stuff. So it's really a great partnership with the river communities, the racers, and the ground crew circus that, you know, goes town to town across the state as well. Everybody has fun. Everybody has a great time. Everybody's wiped out and exhausted. But I think, you know, to Danny's point, you know, even if you're driving a minivan, meeting your spouse at checkpoints, that, you know, that is a grueling adventure that you're awake around the clock and you're trying to find these little boat ramps in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, the ground crews love that experience. They love testing themselves that way. Everybody has that experience of, like, when it's over, I accomplished something. This was tough. I'm proud of what I did, and we made it.
Oh yeah. It is. It is. It's an overwhelming feeling to push the mind and body somewhere that sometimes people don't attempt, in their life. I think, and to do something like this, which, I mean, we did 226 miles of the Colorado River through the Grand, but we camped every night, and I mean, we had some 30-mile days, and the whitewater to deal with, but a lot of it's flat water. And yeah, I mean, to think about 340 miles within, 4 days, or you say 88 hours, how many hours is a lot?
88.
Is just, is a massive challenge. I would perceive from my experience with some different things. So, are there any kind of like tips or, things that you try to tell racers that you'd provide? Maybe is there a place? I mean, there's a web page, right? What's the URL or the address?
Rivermiles.com.
Uh-huh.
And every year we do a series of like email training, which will start here shortly in another week or so. But you can look at last year's, we call them dispatches. So someone could read all of last year's dispatches and kind of get a feel for the advice we give, which is mostly distilled down to stay in the boat. If you're in the boat, even if you're not paddling, you're going 3 miles an hour. So we tell people you need to learn to eat in your boat. You need to learn to pee in your boat. You need to, if you're with a tandem partner, figure out a way that one guy can sleep for 30 minutes while the other guy paddles. I mean, if you're in the boat, you're on the conveyor belt. You're getting closer to that hotel room in St. Charles. The mistake that we see people make is they'll come into a checkpoint, they're wiped out, they just want to get out of the boat, and they'll sit at the checkpoint and eat their sandwich. And, then they repack their boat, and then they repack the car. And I mean, they're doing all these things just as a way to slow down the time before they have to get back in the boat. And eventually they're just, so up against checkpoint times that they're not having fun, and it's a grind.
Absolutely.
But the folks that are having a good time, they've built up a couple hours of cushion against the cutoff times, and they're with the pack, and they're motivated. And it really is like everything in life, it's attitude. I mean, we will see these ripped athletes show up and not finish the race, not have a good time, be miserable. And then we'll see these, overweight guys who, played high school football 30 years ago, and but that's the last time they ever sweat. And but they get out there in an aluminum canoe, and their attitude is such that they finish really well. Yeah. And they have a wonderful time doing it, and they're back again year after year. So I can never pick winners. I've given up trying to pick finishers at the starting line. Yeah. Because so much of it's just in your head. Like, is this going to happen or not?
Now, the checkpoints, is there a remote capability of checking in? I think Dan was mentioning. Dan, if you have any questions too, feel free to chime in. But
sure.
Like if we're cruising down the river, I think we don't have to necessarily stop at the dock or at the right.
Right. There's an app that some people much smarter than me who are paddlers developed that we use, and you can check in via that app from your phone. And every boat's required to have a phone anyway. Yeah. So, and then I think there's even some automation to that where you can tell it to check you in automatically as you pass those coordinates.
Within proximity of the checkpoint, yeah.
So you're not required to stop. And in fact, strategically, especially those first few checkpoints are just chaos. There's so many people stopping. And a lot of people
just blow by.
Strategically, they'll go to some remote boat ramp where there are no services, but they'll meet their ground crew so that they can skip Lexington, which will be just a cluster, for 5 hours.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Scott, I do have a question on that, Scott.
Sure.
So with the app and checking in remotely via the phone, do you get feedback so it is verified that you did hit that checkpoint?
Yes. And they're redoing the app this year, so I don't know all the details, but I know that there is at least a visual a component to that. Like it says, SMS message sent. Now there may be, they also do a lot of audio stuff because at night, you know, we're all kind of on the same page at night because it's tough to see, period. So there's actually in this app, the more advanced of the two apps actually has a map on it that shows you the channel and where you should be, but it has an audio component that will say, go left, go right, you know, so it guides you from the listening side to know where you need to be in the channel. And so that way people don't have to look at their phones at night when they're paddling. They just listen to their phone at night.
Right.
So that's been pretty cool. And even our safety boats use that app. You know, it's like a chart. It's like a $900 chart plotter that we would install on a boat, but it's like a $4 app. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I think it's called MR340 Pro Paddler is the name of the app that costs $3 or $4. Okay. And then there's the free app, which is called I think it's called Race Owl or something like that. And I'll get that information on our website here pretty soon when they're done with it. But yeah, the technology is helping us out a bunch.
Absolutely. Dan, do you have any other questions?
You know, Steve, we can probably come up with a whole list of questions. I think possibly,
or things you want to touch
somewhere
on.
down. Yeah, I think possibly somewhere down the road, we just need to have a good link up, especially if you come into town, Steve, and want to do a little, you know, practicing with Andrew.
I do.
You know, maybe we can get together with Scott over maybe a cold beverage and some barbecue or something, and we can go down. You know as well as I do, Steve, the first time going into events like this, we always have a lot of questions, and we're always, you know, just double checking everything as we go down the list. And I know we still have time left, but we have to relay this to the rest of our teammates to make sure that we have every advantage that we can have prior to getting on the river. So when we get on there, and I'm not saying we're starting with a disadvantage. We're not starting any different from anybody else. We just have to keep moving and paddling.
Absolutely. Dan, maybe give the viewers and listeners a little information about the BVA and what they can do, or where they can find that on the internet.
Yeah, just go to www.bva.org, and that'll take you to our website. I think something I would like to throw out there is we'll get something set up for donations, and what I would like to promote, not just our association, but so Veterans Day every year, it's a veteran service organization that hosts the Veterans Day ceremony at Arlington. And in some twisted sense of humor, it is the blinded veterans' turn to host the Veterans Day ceremony, like I said, at Arlington in 2020. So I'm sure the intelligent person is picking up that the blind guys get the 2020
Such
event.
A bad joke.
No, I say let's play it to the most we can. You know, I think it's funny.
What's your visual acuity? 2020.
But we have to. That also comes at a price. So we're looking at, you know, up to $60,000 it's going to cost to host that Veterans Day ceremony at Arlington in 2020. So once again, we're raising awareness for our association, but also, you know, we can work together possibly to raise some funds to help support that. And I think it's very worthy. And anything we can do, but we know that every nonprofit needs donations to continue on. And that's what we'll work for. And the biggest thing, though, is just the recognition and the camaraderie that we're going to share on the river.
No, this is really cool. And I just started doing this show, Scott, just kind of for fun and trying to connect people to different wild things, you know, whether it's science and research related to improving eyesight and or connecting people to the blind, visually impaired community. Because growing up, you know, I hadn't met anybody and really interacted with someone that was blind or visually impaired on any kind of level. And so it's a lot of people are like in the dark, you know, kind of in a sense. And so, you know, spreading awareness. it's really cool to do it through adventure. You know, I have a foundation, and our motto is, you know, awareness through adventure and exploration. And I think it's cool that people can sign up for a race, no matter what your ability is, and explore what the possibilities are, what you're capable of accomplishing and doing, and that can make you very aware of through adventuring through. So it's really really cool to have you guys on to talk about
great.
This.
Yeah.
Is there anything you guys want to add? Because I'll do some closing remarks, but don't want to cut you off, and I don't want to keep you all day.
I would just throw in there, Steve, that and it's for all the listeners and for our fellow blinded veterans. The only real limitations that we face in life are those that we place upon ourselves, and it's up to us how we deal with those limitations or those obstacles and how we overcome them and move forward. Absolutely.
It's so cool to do things as a team, and a lot of the stuff that we do in life, a lot of people don't realize it maybe sometimes, but there's a lot of teamwork going on. There's a lot of team players. So to make a big thing happen, and I'm always telling people I'm quite literally guided through life, and you know, it's fun to have someone that is willing to take me into the mountains, to take me, you know, down the rivers, and this will be an epic and a cool adventure, no matter how it ends. Hopefully at the finish, and it's Kansas City, Kansas to St. Charles, Missouri. Correct? Is the
That's correct. And the finish rate is about 67% year to year.
Wow.
But I haven't done the math, but I would strongly suspect that, you know, we have a lot of veterans that do the race.
Yeah.
And I would suspect that their finish rate is higher than 66%, just by, you know, nature of the beast and the type of training and mental capacity that's needed to be a veteran. Translates very, very well to this, you know, this type of grueling event, I'm sure. So I think you guys are going to do great, and I know the community is excited to meet you, and will be very eager to paddle alongside you.
Thank you, Scott. So I'll make some closing remarks. So I was talking to Daniel Wallace and Scott Mansker about the MR340, Missouri River 340. Go sign up if you want to go and challenge yourself. Make sure you read up on things, you know, use the interweb to study the different things that you need and require, and the fitness you need. But Danny Wallace and Tim Hornick, it's awesome to work with them on different things, both blind veterans, and putting together this whole mission of paddling the Missouri River is going to be epic. Make sure you visit stevebaskis.com/giveaway. We're still trying to give away an iPad. By April 1st, we'll have selected someone. If you listen to the show, or just like technology like that, you can listen to the show on it. So go sign up. And this was a great show. And thanks for tuning in. Goodbye, everybody.